Okay, well, welcome everybody. This is the Sophie Strand Book Club launch, and I just want to invite Sophie to come in right away. She has a kind of an invitation to help us weave our web today.
Thanks, Jonathan, and thank you everyone who came here today. Um, I always, whenever I teach a class or do a talk, say maybe we can locate ourselves where we are physically, but also a being, a more than human being, a microbe, a rock, an insect, an animal that has arrived to us in the past day or so, be it in dreams or in an actual circumstance, and weave together our more than human web. So if you want to write that in the chat, you can. I'm going to do it. I have had a cardinal that has come right up to my door and just like talked to me. I never thought of cardinals as being very talkative, but it's been very talkative to me. And I'm in the Hudson Valley. Black rabbit, Vancouver, hawks in California, roly polies. I love roly polies. South Africa zebra. Wow. Okay, this is a very interesting web. Raven, um, otter. I just saw the most amazing video. Speaking of which, if someone can find it and put it in the chat, they will get an A+ from me of this woman who apparently is followed around town by ravens, and her friend takes a picture, like a video, of the ravens following her car. It's amazing. I love it. I've been trying to find it. Um, okay, great. Thank you, Jonathan.
Well, my name's Jonathan Gustin, and I am the founder and lead teacher here at Purpose Guides Institute. We help people to discover and embody their life's purpose. We do Purpose Guides training, we do meditation teacher training, and occasionally we do book clubs. We've had luminaries like Adyashanti and Thomas More and Joanna Macy and many more. And it's my absolute delight on book launch day itself to introduce to you Sophie Strand if you don't know her. Sophie Strand is a writer based in the Hudson Valley who focuses on the intersection of spirituality, storytelling, and ecology. But it would probably be more authentic to call her a troubadour animist with a propensity to spin yarns that inevitably turn into love stories. Give her a salamander and a stone, and she'll write you a love story. Sophie was raised by house cats, puffballs, possums, raccoons, and an opinionated crippled goose. In every neighborhood that she's ever lived in, she has been known as the Walker. She believes strongly that all thinking happens interstitially, between beings, ideas, differences, and mythical gradients. So a warm welcome on book launch day to you, Sophie.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you for this little digital ecosystem. I always think that there's actual, photons hitting our screen, then bouncing, coming through your screen, and then creating light in the room where you are. We are actually materially in each other's spaces in ways that we can remember. So we are actually with each other.
Yeah, indeed, indeed. Well, I thought it would be lovely to have you start. So this is the preview call for a four-session book club, which Sophie will do the first two. That starts in 2 weeks. I'll send an email about that, or if you're watching on YouTube, you can look below. We'll do half the book for the first part, half the book for the second part. I'll do a couple of bonus calls afterward. So I want to whet people's appetites because I may be the only person who's read the full book. So perhaps you'd maybe do a little reading for us, and then we can go to Q&A.
Here we are. I'm going to do a reading from the first chapter, which is called Back to the Body. So it kind of locates you in that moment when you first get sick and you think maybe you're going to get better. So here's my reading. Getting sick isn't just a simple bodily experience. It comes with 1,000 years of moral baggage. To get sick is to be impure. To get sick is to fail. In this story, a story I inherited from the culture at large, my illness represented a personal failing. The impurity in me was too dense, too murky to allow me to return to health. In this story, that summer is a crime scene. Somewhere in that effervescent adolescent romp, I did something that tipped the scales away from health and towards sickness. Until the age of 16, I was healthy. Then I woke up and I was sick. In that story, I lost my body that summer. But there is another story, one that is very quiet, but one that strikes me as being closer to the truth. I did not lose my body that summer. Instead, I finally found it. Now I look back on the summer leading up to my illness once more, but I slow down the film reel. I peer deeply into my own younger face. Here I am at the same parties, the same swimming holes, the same mountain summits, but I don't see a healthy young girl anymore. There's a wild glassiness in her eyes. They are unfocused, almost blind. I see a girl moving so fast, experimenting with so many drugs, taking so many risks that she might just be able to outrun confronting the pain she's been haunted by since early childhood. I see an animal trying to gnaw its leg off to escape a trap. At some point in my childhood, I decided to leave my body. My brain seemed to work pretty well, and it was faster, cleaner, and happier when it didn't have to register the unpleasant feelings I associated with my stomach, my legs, my chest, my throat. The issue was that no one in my life recognized this dissociation as a problem. In a society that prizes our ability to master our bodies and work against our soft, fleshy needs, my ability to not feel my body was rewarded. It was seen as a kind of gift. Sophie doesn't feel cold, my mom would tell my friends' parents when I would run outside barefoot, coatless in the winter, with ice cutting through the soles of my feet. Brutal cold didn't touch me, and I was always covered in cuts and bruises and burns. I hardly ever wore coats or tights. I completed insane endurance competitions, running long distance races and setting the presidential fitness record for number of sit ups in a minute each year. I contorted myself into weird shapes and dislocated my joints to make my friends laugh. I pictured my body as an action figure and myself like a balloon on a string hovering above. What if I could just float up there forever, safe from the messy suffering of everyday life? What if I never had to come down? Everyone seemed to love the show. That summer, I jumped off cliffs into shallow water. I ducked under no trespassing signs, climbing up through the rusted ruins of old oxidized cranes that hung over open water. I tried any drug offered to me at parties, smoked cigarettes. I convinced older guys to buy for me from the gas station. I snuck out of the house to ride around in my friend's car, seatbelt unbuckled, screaming out the window as we hit 100 miles per hour on winding mountain roads. I forgot to eat for days at a time. I drank until I passed out, until I vomited. I ran miles and miles barefoot until the soles of my feet left bloody footprints on the asphalt. My parents were terrified. It was tricky. I was a gifted and responsible student. My grades were better than ever. I was doing extracurriculars and winning writing awards. It was hard to pinpoint what was wrong. I was not a classically bad kid. In fact, by all superficial metrics, I was doing fantastically. But there was something about my behavior that was increasingly reckless. Burn me, fuck me, humiliate me, I didn't care. I couldn't feel anything. I was invincible. We live in a society that lionizes warriors, athletes, and heroic individuals who conquer their fears. Pop psychology has us complete an inventory of our limiting beliefs as we move along the path toward fulfillment. We must confront our fears and mute the parts of us that register terror. Fear is conflated with weakness, fear is feminized, fear is bodily. The only thing we have to fear is the body itself, that soft, fallible organism which is not immune to trespass, bullets, rape, and the passage of time. A lack of fear is rewarded by our culture, but it is also extremely dangerous. Fear is not an accidental feature of being alive. It is an evolutionary gift that developed to help us survive. Fear is the prickle of adrenaline in our system, telling us that a certain place is unsafe and that predators could be nearby. Fear is the correct knowledge that women feel when they walk home alone at night. To ignore that fear is to risk real danger. Fear is the understanding that our well being is not guaranteed. It is a type of humility. We are animals living alongside other animals. We can be eaten, we can be injured. We must proceed with care and caution. Put very simply, fear keeps us from doing stupid things. It keeps us alert. Disembodiment denies us this somatic intuition. It cuts us off from our ability to smell storms, interact with other species respectfully, and taste for the edibility of wild foods. When we override our fear, we don't just override our bodies. We override our ability to read and respond to our environments and the messages they are sending us as smells, sounds, and textures. If we can't feel pain, we also can't access the heights of pleasure. If we don't honor the limitations of a sick body, the body gets sicker. Like walking on a broken leg, refusing to feel can end up making the injury much worse. If you've ever been in an accident, you know that the physical pain hits you harder the following day when your fight or flight response has dissipated and you finally deliquesce back into the shape of yourself. After the accident in your home, in your bed, your body senses that it is safe to assess where the damage has been done. But for some of us, the sense of safety never arrives, and the disembodiment continues in perpetuity. We keep walking on a broken foot. We keep pretending nothing is wrong because to pause to heal is dangerous. To stop and tune into our body is dangerous. We know there is pain to feel, and if we felt it all, it could destroy us. I look at Western culture and how it has terraformed the world, paving rainforests and marshes and wildflower fields under concrete. I'm struck that the way we live seems like a magnified version of dissociation on a culture wide scale. Our extractive ecocidal practices create open wounds in the earth, escalating extinctions and unbalancing weather systems. We pretend that the earth we burn for fuel, gash for minerals, and mutilate for capital gain is not connected to us. We live above it. We pretend this earth is not our own body extended. Just like I retreated into my head when I experienced pain hovering like a balloon above my body, so has our culture retreated into the notion of human exceptionalism to avoid feeling the suffering it has inflicted on its own larger body. But we are not floating above this earth. We are intimately, materially, metabolically linked with every plant, animal, and ecology that is grappling with unimaginable pain and disruption. We have been numb for so long, we no longer understand that the body we are harming is an extension of our own. When we clear cut a forest or drive another population of birds to extinction, we do not somatically register that we are twisting a knife in our own side. What happens when your foot falls asleep and you try to wake it up? It hurts. It really hurts. There's a reason the sensation is called pins and needles. As pressure is taken off the sensory nerve and stimuli begins to flow along its proper channel, our body registers pain signals again. The leg was in pain when it was asleep, but it was blithely unaware. Once we wake the leg back up, this feeling rushes back all at once. Coming back into our bodies isn't always the lubricated pleasure bloom therapists and self-help gurus promise. Mostly it burns and prickles and hurts. But we need to wake the leg back up again to walk, to move, and to survive. We need to wake up to the fact that we live in an intimate relationship with a world that is suffering. The threshold we have to cross is one of extreme discomfort. And most medical and healing paradigms tell us that discomfort should be avoided or medicated. Through force-fed techno-optimism and a constant stream of media distraction, we are encouraged to avoid sitting with silence, with uncertainty, and with howls of pain from beings that live outside our doors. But being numb doesn't just mean we avoid discomfort. It means we are equally denied the full spectrum of physical pleasure and intelligence. There is a world of wild love and bodily creativity just past the doorway of prickles and pins. There is sex without sin, delicious incorrect embodiment, queerness, interspecies collaboration. There is a community of more than human beings with advice on how to navigate climate change and social collapse. There is another story about how I got sick, one harder to hold, one that prickles through me like pins and needles. That summer, lightning struck with illness. I finally had no choice but to come back into my body. Physical pain stitched me back into the physical presence I had been trying to escape my entire life. I didn't lose my body when I got sick. No, I finally came back into it. Thanks.
Oh, thank you. That, for me, that was the most poetic rendering of this distinction. On the one hand, the orientation of humility and interconnectedness, and on the other hand, the story of separation, disassociation. And you really made this distinction, I thought, between sort of this heroic, health is going to make us whole, versus what's real and what's here. Is that something of your intention here? These two, what terms do you use to hold these sort of two stories?
The story of wellness and the story of unwellness.
Yeah.
um, I mean, I think there's a culture-wide story of wholeness and health and normativity of anthropocentrism. There's a story that casts the human being as the main character, and I'm interested in the story that came before us and that will come after us, where we're not a main character, we're side characters. We're important, but we're not the main event.
Yeah. And so for you, the health journey, the body as doorway. If you could just sort of like how for you, when we spoke earlier, you said, actually, I wouldn't go back to an earlier period where I was healthier. And in some ways, that was shocking to hear the gift of illness. If you'd maybe just kind of unpack that a little bit, how that can actually be, because that it's not obvious to a lot of folks.
Well, I always want to. I think gift is a very loaded term, and it's often a term that able-bodied people will project onto ill people to fetishize them. So I think it's complicated. It's more about you can't get rid of something. So do you choose?
Mm,
It's like when there's a nail that's nailed into a tree, and the tree decides to change its shape around the nail. Can't get rid of the nail, so it creates a more interesting shape. So when you have something that you can't remove that creates discomfort, you can choose to collaborate with it in a creative way. That I think to have illness, to have pain that is irresolvable, is to be forced to take on more interesting shapes than people who are able bodied might necessarily choose to take on. And
mm,
perhaps in embodying those shapes that are more tricky, you get a different perspective. I always talk about yoga as being kind of an example, which is in yoga, there's this inherent understanding that our soma, our body, holds different mind states. So if you hold a certain position, you can activate a certain kind of paradigm shift in your own being. And I think that to be ill is a kind of sick yoga. You are forced to hold shapes that are so uncomfortable that no one would willingly order them off the menu. And I think at a moment in time when we need different alternative perspectives, it is to people who are forced to hold the shapes of mortality and chronic pain and illness and neurodivergence that we should ask for advice for their stories.
mm. Beautiful. You quoted in the book, the Gospel of Thomas,
Yeah.
Jesus. You called him a wilier Jesus, I believe. At least that's how I got it. And he said, "That which you have will save you if you bring it forth from yourself. That which you do not have within you will kill you if you do not have it within you." Could you open that up a little bit for us?
Yeah. Well, I wrote a book about who the wild storytelling healer might have been before he was mistranslated by empire. So to just contextualize a little bit, I wrote a historical fiction novel about Mary Magdalene, and I was very interested in the Gospel of Thomas, which is perhaps the earliest remnants we have of what he might have said. And they're almost like koans. They're like Zen koans. They're riddles. They're very different than the parables that happen in the canonical, more well-known gospels. And I'm interested in these koans because they don't immediately have an answer. And I think that's something that in Western culture we're not really good at dealing with. We want the answer and we want it now. We're not good at sitting with things that are irresolvable or with illness that doesn't have a cure. And I think that I love the Gospel of Thomas because it presents these conundrums and says the sitting with it and not solving it is the point. Being with this, living with it, living alongside it, letting it change you is the whole process. And so for me, that apothegm, that saying in particular, is really important, which is if you're given something, if there's something in you that feels difficult, you have to move it. You have to let it change you. That you can't if you can't get rid of it, you have to let it move through you, come out of you, and alchemize. I think of the body as being kind of like an alchemical vessel. Can you let it
Mm,
ferment? Can you make something that is good wine?
mm. Uh, Early in the book, you explored trauma, and so I'll read a
Yeah.
quote here. You said, "I was suddenly struck that the popular idea of trauma had become conceptually similar to the ancient idea of sin, in its original Hebraic formulation, meaning to miss the mark. The traumatized nervous system was a dead end that forked off from a straight highway, a deviation, a wrong turn, a wrong self." So this idea of sin or missing the mark in trauma, I'd love to have you just expound on that a little bit.
Well, I mean, I think we think of modern science and modern healing paradigms as being totally divorced from theological baggage, but they're oftentimes just dressed up Christianity or like
Hmm.
dressed up fundamentalism. And there's a lot in healthism and in this idea that we are personally responsible for the failings of our bodies and our minds is very oftentimes a kind of spiritual materialism dressed up, which is that we have somehow, if we're sick, it's because we did something wrong. And you can go to a energy healer and they'll tell you it's because you did something wrong in a past life. And then you can go to a doctor and they can say it's because you're not living correctly. And I think it's in the trauma space right now, as someone who is a woman who is a survivor of early childhood sexual abuse, there is a very tricky thing, which is that you are told that you are broken, your nervous system is broken. You have to come back into the window of tolerance and you have to spend all your money on boutique trauma modalities that are actually have been shown to probably not work. And you become more and more ragged. And then 10 years down the line, you realize you spent thousands of dollars in time on trying to atone for your nervous system. So it was really interesting to me to look at, in particular, women with early childhood sexual trauma do what looked like a medieval peasant would do to try to atone for their sin. It's like the same thing. There's this real idea of personal failing, and somehow we must atone. It's like when you would pay for to get into heaven in Middle Ages.
Indulgences,
Like
yeah.
indulgences, where we're constantly shelling out more and more money to healers and to somatic therapists because we feel like because we can't work, because we can't participate in this ecocidal sick culture, we're the sick ones. Um,
Mm.
I've increasingly been skeptical of that paradigm, but I always hold both, which is living with PTSD, living with illness is really unpleasant. If there are ways to feel better, I am always going to try them. I don't work by subtraction, I work by addition. So if I will always try a new therapy, I will always try something new. I won't throw anything out, but I am skeptical at the ways in which we posit neurodivergence, PTSD, and chronic illness as being a personal failing that we have to personally correct.
Well, amen. Thank you for that. Um, So if human wholeness isn't a target, something that we don't have, that we have to move to through, better health or more money or a partner or whatever, a promotion, whatever it may be, what is your idea of human wholeness that is essential, that is primordial, that is primal, that is already the case, and how to recognize it, I guess, is the second question.
I don't believe in wholeness. I think wholeness is an idea of the end of the story, the punctuation mark. And the truth is evolution is ongoing. I always joke that there's no last monkey, first human. There's no stake in the river of evolution. you know, and to think of us as being a complete species is also some kind of fiction. Aliveness necessitates movement, necessitates change, mutation, mistakes, failure. I always tell people your hand began as a mistake that then slowly turned out to be correctly like the photo negative of an ecosystem. But it was a mistake that, our bodies are constantly kind of changing and glitching out to see if they work a little bit better with the changing ecosystem. And so it's a dance. For me, it's not about wholeness, it's about dancing. Can we keep moving? Can we keep changing? That to stay still in evolution is to go extinct. You know, that the species that stop adapting are the species that do not survive when the environment changes. And the environment always changes.
Mm, mm. So I want to move to, actually, I'm going to invite people to put in the chat some questions that you might like me to share here.
Absolutely. And if anyone, I mean, it's also wonderful if people can unmute themselves and ask them in person because it's lovely to see people's faces.
Yeah, yeah. So let's do that too. So two options. One, you can put something in the chat and I can read the question. And after I do this one, we can have a few people come on live. Um, you wrote it just one sentence here. I would finally honor my body as a material refusal to participate in this ecocidal culture. So if you sort of bring together these two things, the way we treat our body and the way we treat the body of, the one body, the
Yeah.
planet.
I mean, I think, the macrocosm is the microcosm. We we create pollution, we offload it onto communities that didn't create it in the first place, and then it is offloaded onto the very earth that builds our bodies, and then our bodies are filled with microplastics, and we have more autoimmunity and more depression and anxiety than ever before. That if we really slow down, we can see that we are only self through other. With every breath, we rebuild ourselves with otherness, with the pheromones, the microbes, the food grown in the soil outside our door. Our very bodies are built from our ecosystems. And if we are corrupting and hurting our ecosystems, we are going to very simply, very clearly be hurting our own bodies. It seems very deranged to me as a species that we're doing this. And I do think that sick people can be the canary in the coal mine. They can say, like, we are sick not because we have personally failed, but because we are the place where systemic tangled network depression sediment. That we are the place where you first begin to see how things are really breaking down.
Mm, mm, mm.
But I mean, the one thing I will say is important to me is to never get too stuck in the human. So to look at how your pain, your discomfort is a doorway into a relationship with another being. For me in particular, I have connective tissue disease, and I love fungi and mycorrhizal fungi. So mycorrhizal fungi are the filamentous threads that weave together like a forest. They live in soil, substrate, wood, dead matter. And for me, the connective tissue of the soil is a way of plugging myself into healthy connective tissue that I don't have. And
Mm.
because I can't necessarily cure my body, I can perhaps become an advocate for conservation of mycorrhizal biodiversity and for knowledge of these beings that are almost never counted as part of, flora and fauna and fungi. We never actually think of fungi as being their own kingdom and is underpinning the health of ecosystems. So for me, I've really wedded my wound to another being. And I think that's a really helpful thing to do right now, to not get stuck in the human, to see
Yeah.
how our pain, our wounding is a doorway we can walk through into more ecological awareness.
Mm. I love that. And I love the book. The message for me that I took, is the edge, the boundary of what we consider our existence, our life, does not stop here. There's a constant invitation to experience, the interstitial, the interconnected. So,
Yeah.
thank you. Let's have a few folks come on. So we have Anna and then Jacob. So Anna, please unmute and great.
You're muted still. Hi. Oh, you got muted again.
There we go.
There
Hi.
you are. Hi. It's so nice to see you.
Lovely to see you too. I'm so excited to have your book in my hands. Oh gosh, I'm wondering about, as I get more sick, even as I do so much internal healing around the emotional wounds, early childhood, and so on. And as I become more isolated, I'm noticing that there's this sadness around like not being able to go sit and lie and be present with the connective tissue. Of course, the underground mycelium is so potent for me. All those charismatic fungi that we get to witness when they emerge. But I've been wondering about, your ability to have conversations with beings that maybe we don't notice as much. I want to connect more with the fungi in my body and, the microbes that have their own language within my gut and the rest of, my skin, all around the body. We have fungal and bacterial and microbial friends that are supporting us. And I know, of course, through malpractice and diagnosis that many of those beings were taken from you with antibiotics and so on. But I'm curious if you've had direct conversations with the microbes in you and what that sounds like and what that feels like.
Absolutely. I love the term. Shiv Watkins, who is a great Substack scientist, microbiologist, calls them the smalls. And that's what I call them, the smalls. And I think, I have plenty of overgrowths and incorrect colonies in my body that my body can't manage, viruses and microbes and fungi. And, I think there's this tendency to become kind of eco-precious about like tree bathing and going to the forest and the sit spot, when the truth is that many of us can't leave our homes. Like for most
Yeah.
of this winter, I've been pretty confined to bed, like
Mhm.
unable to drive, unable to see, definitely not able to go out in direct sunlight. And I oftentimes say that, our body is our sit spot. Your very body is a feral sit spot. It's a landscape. There are microbes in your belly button. And I also think that we are instruments that are being played by microbes. There are some people who think that we are the quorum sensing of the microbes in our gut. And I think that can be both hideous in a kind of Last of Us simplistic way, or it can be kind of beautiful, which is that we are an instrument that are played by these small symphonies. And so
Mhm.
sometimes when I have brain fog or I feel sick, I'm like, I am playing a music that is not, doesn't necessarily feel right, but I am an instrument that's being played. And I think when we have a fever, a music is being played through us. The viruses are strumming along us. And it's the most intimate. I oftentimes think the microbes really show us the most intimate type of animistic experience we can have, that they use our own bodies to communicate. They say, okay, you can't hear us, you're not listening, we'll use your own body. We will change the flavor of your consciousness. I mean, I think a beautiful way to do this, if it's possible, is to ferment your own food, or
Mhm.
to create mead with just honey and water in a jar. You can look up on Google, it's super easy to do. And you can, you ferment it with your own hands. You create something that changes your consciousness with your own microbial communities, and
Yeah.
and that can be this beautiful looping experience with the smalls. I think for me, it's scary. I mean, my mother almost died of sepsis. She almost died of a bacterial overgrowth in her body. And I'm very respectful of these beings. They're not safe. But I always think of that great line in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, when Lucy asks the beaver, like, oh, is Aslan safe, the lion? She goes, no, not safe, but he's good. you know, there are beings here that they don't necessarily subscribe to our human dualisms of right and wrong. We have a very narrow slice of ethical perspective. They're doing something on a scale that's too large for us to even see.
Mhm.
And so I'm very respectful of the smalls, and I can see how they play my own body as an instrument.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's really good to see you.
Me
Thank you for
too.
coming, Hannah.
Thanks, Anna. Let's go to Jacob and then Luca. And please unmute.
Oh, still muted.
There we go. All the buttons.
Hi.
Thank you. Hello. Holy cow. To cut to the question, okay? So how would you, Sophie, respond, relate, or even honor this, what you call the idea of healing beyond what we would recognize as the physical, and then particularly through this landscape of myth that you're so relative to?
Hey, could you try rephrasing the question a little bit? You're muted again.
You're muted. Yep.
There you
Okay.
go. Thank you. Yeah, rephrase in what context?
Are you asking for a myth? Are you asking for, I mean, everything I write is an answer to that question writ large, but
Mm.
is there a specific entry point that you're looking for me to address?
I guess the idea of how would you honor that sense of healing beyond what we could say as this physical sense of it?
Hmm. I mean, a friend of mine once said to me, she's also chronically ill and has the same condition as me. She said, "It's not healing is not health is not wellness. It's the amount of joy you can feel." And so for me, I'm really interested in trying to see how much joy I can feel. And joy is not being about an absence of pain or an absent or safety. That in fact, like, joy is about risking death. It's like it is polished by mortality. You might be the most joyous right the second before you die. We don't know. And so for me, I'm really interested in characters and mythological paradigms that show me these risk takers, these people who skirt, like I think of Icarus, like, we demonize Icarus, but boy, he got close to the sun. Um and and I think, there's a great poem by Robinson Jeffers that everyone should be reading right now called Shine, Perishing Republic. And in it he says meteors are not needed less than mountains. I think about that. Like, what does it mean? Audre Lorde in her Cancer Diary says, like, I want to go out like fucking comet. She said, she's like, I want to burn up. Like, I think there's something really erotic and powerful about wanting to, like, if you're gonna burn up, you make the fire as big as possible, as sexy as possible. And so I'm really interested in thinking about the kind of Dionysian element of celebrating inside the bonfire. You know.
Love that last sentence. Thank you so
Mhm.
much.
Trying, and I will say, like, I can say all of this, but like every day is really, really hard with, living with mental health issues or with ongoing health issues. It's not easy. I fail and take 8 steps back every single day. And my parents are the ones who see it. They see me scared, and they see me losing my sense of meaning and rightness and having to remake my world again and again and again. So I just want to,
Mm.
draw back the curtain and say that, like, I am a failure. I'm always failing at this and trying to do better.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie and Jacob. Let's go to Luca and then Eduardo. Please unmute Luca.
Hi, Luca.
No, not able to unmute. It looks like no. Okay, we'll try to get you back. Just
Okay.
hold on a sec. Oh,
Can you hear
we did
me?
it.
Hi.
It was telling me before. Hi. It was telling me before that the host was not letting me unmute. Sorry. Thank you, host. Um, Sophie, the frames and the myths that you offer um, are so helpful to me, and in particular in these days, I've been thinking about what you have said in some clip in which has been mirrored in some of the books that I've read of yours about the spider's web and consciousness being in the paths that we go through. And so, right now, in this question that I want to ask about, um, from the reading you did today about this responsibility to heal being put on the individual, I want to ask if you can, um, in the face of what empire means today and what your experience of what empire means today, how can we try to heal our social relationships, like in these webs that we weave? And not, I don't want to ask how can we try to heal, but I'm curious if you have any other frames about like how you are approaching the social relationships which with other human beings, that are so um, feeling divisive and feeling re- repetitive of cycles of empire that I know that you know about.
Oh, it's so tender and immediate. This question. I think about how we have never known more and had less influence. And it is so crazy making. And we have forgotten how to interact with each other. Like I think about, you don't scream in the comment section at the person you're gonna have to see at the grocery store every day. Even if they voted for Trump. Because you have to see them at the grocery store every day. And they make your food or they raise the chickens that you eat. And I think that there's this fabric of responsibility that we've forgotten to weave because of late stage capitalism and how it deracinates us from the materials of our actual existence, from our food, from our medicine, from our neighbors. And I think a person's work I come back to as Anna Singh, anthropologist who wrote Mushroom at the End of the World. And Anna Singh talks a lot about salvage ecologies and how it's not about doing things right. It's about like bric-a-brac, putting things together in a way that you're never like you're kind of like salvaging in the ruins. Like I think right now I feel paralyzed when I think about the systems that are driving us into war and extinction and how little influence I have, how much information I get on my phone every day, and how little I can do. What I can do is get to know who lives on my road, get to know the farmers in my area, get to know the ecosystems that are being possibly developed and see if there are ways I can protect them. Like go as small and deep as possible. I really think that one thing that has been hard but has been an interesting lesson in my life is I'm a Sagittarius, which means I'm supposed to travel. But I'm really sick and I can hardly travel. And I really can't hardly leave my house these days. So I I think a lot about instead of like going wide and superficial, I'm going deep.
Mm.
I'm walking. I walk hundreds of miles a month, but it's within like a 2 mile radius of my house. I'm not creating a lot of superficial relationships online. I'm trying to create relationships with the people who, when there's a hurricane or a weather event, which there have been many weather events in the Hudson Valley, will know how to get water or can help me out. I think these things are not photographable. They don't change. They don't stop Elon from digesting democracy, but
Yeah.
they have real implications in our day-to-day lives. And a friend of mine, David Abram, I mean, a lot of people here probably know him. He sometimes said a great thing to me that changed my life at a moment where I was really being asked to do a lot of talks online and do a lot of online speaking, and I was feeling more and more anxious and unregulated. And he was like, you're not feeding your days. He was like, you have to, like, if your days aren't being fed, if like you're not feeding your stories and your art to the earth right outside your home, if you're feeding them to people you're never going to meet, the mathematics are wrong. You have to figure out how to feed your days. And that was a really important reframe for me. It's like no matter how much I do online, no matter how much I connect with people who aren't in my ecosystem, I have to figure out a way to garden the things that are right under my feet.
Yeah, I thank you. Um, I was motivated to ask this specific question because this morning I was working with my students, and I was working with students around like the age of 18 to 20, and I find I consider myself someone who takes so much of like what feeding my days means is like being in communion with other people, and finding myself just being so frustrated by like the fissures that empire was making in those interactions, and like
Yeah.
leaving that space with others being so depleted and needing to like literally walk like barefoot for the first time this year on the grass. And I was like, oh my gosh. But I wanted to just know what it's been like for you, and I'm so glad that you get those miles in on your street. And
But Yeah, I think we're really not good at being with each other these days across difference. So thank you for bringing that up. It's just we have to, I think sharing food, like communal meals, can we agree that we all need to eat at least, and we all need to protect how food is grown locally? Like my brother's a farmer, so this is something I think about a lot. I really do think it's as simple as that. I think like figuring out how to grow food and how to share that food with the people who live there is pretty revolutionary.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I'm glad that you are here on this call. I was so sad when you said that you were going to be gone for a little while, and I'm glad that you're on this call. So thank you, Sophie.
Thank you so much. It's really lovely to meet you.
Thanks, Luca. Let's go to Eduardo, and then I'm going to read a question from Meg.
Hi. You are muted? There you are.
Yes, now I'm, yes.
Hi.
Yeah. Hi, Sophie. Good to see you. Hi, everybody. Um, First of all, thank you for being here and thanks for everything you're doing and congratulations for the new book. It's really exciting. It's great. Thanks everybody for the amazing questions. And I'm a Sagittarius too, so I really understand the expansiveness of like wanting to travel and wanting to move and wanting to go outward and balance between that and the inwards going. So, like it's the way you're reframing this whole discourse, and specifically the concept of the doorway is
Mhm.
really, really profound. And like healing and everything that's around healing and can be seen definitely as like a gateway, and both inwards and outwards.
Yeah.
And the outwards can have very, very like crucial and beneficial aspects when you use it as a tool, let's say, to connect with the world, with the ecosystem, and with everything that we are part of and is part of us. And it can also be a doorway to escapism. And especially if you're stuck in bed, I mean, this is sensitive and like if you can't move or things like that, you are going to crave escapism. You are going to seek like some outlet that allows you to connect to the rest too. So like, this can be explored in so many different ways, like from just, navigating the internet forever, or even more extreme things like you can go as far as saying like astral traveling or things like that, like exploring other means um, to move and to travel. So yeah, I was wondering if you had any insight on that, like the danger of escapism, but also like the resource of escapism, like how does it relate to healing and
Well,
yeah.
I would say that the people who are practicing escapism are the able-bodied people who are living in a communal hallucination that money is real and that human beings are the most important people in the entire world. And they're living in a very dangerous fictional escape world. And I really feel like most people are living in like a video game where they think that everyone else are like non-players. Every other species are non-players. So I will say that there's, you know, yes, I think that when we're in pain, it is very easy to want to try and escape the pain, to gnaw off our leg. And I think that addiction, I think that disembodiment, risk taking, like I was talking about, like there was a period of my life where I was really disembodied because I was really in a lot of pain. And I think that, and the courage and the culture encouraged and rewarded that behavior. So I think it's sometimes we can begin to look at the ways in which we're a squeaky wheel are probably a good thing when we're fitting into the culture. When our survival mechanisms help us become better workers and better digesters of ecosystems, there may be escapism. There may be not good. But when they make us a squeaky wheel, when they keep us from being productive, when they keep us from, you know, participating in this culture, maybe they are helping us slow down and slow the culture down. I think about how if Americans just like slept 1 hour more, it would like do more for emissions than all of these other environmental movements we've tried to do. Like just doing less would do more. And I think a lot about how people who are sick and bedbound, who are dreaming, who are astral traveling, are in a lot of ways those squeaky wheels. We need to slow down this car because the car is trying to go off a cliff, you know? Um, that being said, I do think I am a person who is always trying to escape my pain. Like I have so many survival mechanisms. You talk about them in the book. Anorexia was one of them, and either I went into a really serious eating disorder as a way to try and not feel what was happening in my body. And I think the only way we can avoid those pitfalls is through community, through people who can hold us and keep us sober, who can say like, it looks like you are kind of hurting yourself and other people. And so I think sobriety happens in community. Thank you.
Thanks, Eduardo. So
Thanks,
I'm
Sophie.
gonna read a question from Meg. Meg writes, I'm so aligned with what you're saying, Sophie. I'm curious about whether you believe we humans, and probably all life, are at the beginning of a species change, a higher consciousness species for which interdependence is foundational. And then she says, I love your originality.
That's very sweet. I am always a little skeptical of narratives of ascent or progress. We've had 5 major extinction events where like 99% of all life was extinguished. And then in the opened up ecological niches, life experimented and began again. That I think that life always feels more circular to me. And I'm always a little skeptical that we are raising the consciousness, we are complexifying, we are going to get better and better and better and bigger. That's very Trump, better, bigger, more. And I'm decaying, I'm falling apart, and yet it's very interesting. So I think that we can kind of complexify this idea that we are always headed towards something better. I was reading this book actually yesterday that a friend gave me about in like the issues with modern environmentalism. It's called Immemorial by Kate Markham. And it was talking about how some scientists and anthropologists believe that what makes us human is that we think about the future. Like other species don't plan for the future or hoard food or do these things. And it was interesting to me because in the book it posits that as being like an inherently good thing. And I was like, well, if we're always thinking about the future but digesting that future, is that a good thing? Like it was a very interesting thing for me. Like is our preoccupation with what comes next, with what better state of consciousness is tomorrow, actually maybe our pitfall, the thing that keeps us from being present and here and taking care of ourselves now. So I don't have an answer, but it's definitely a curiosity of mine.
Yeah. One of the 100 questions I have here for you that relates to the future is time. So you wrote these 4 sentences. What does it feel like when we exit time entirely? I've tried for years to keep up. Maybe this medicine, this supplement, this trauma model would bring me up to speed. But maybe, although I wasn't living inside human time, I was on time for something. And then this last sentence, my body was sick, yes, but maybe not in the way I thought it was. Maybe it was sick of human time. It needed glacial time, microbial time, mineral time.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that every time I start getting, but I like to be on time for things, and I kind of because my parents were kind of pathologically late. Not a bad thing. They're artists and writers, but it made me very, very intense about being on time. So that when I start to experience things that make me late, like my car breaks down or something weird happens, I always get really anxious. And then I usually have a really big encounter with an animal. And I always think that like when I start to like when my life starts to like make me late for human events, it's because it's trying to make me on time for something else. And I need to trust that redirection. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, we're nearly out of time for our preview call. I want to invite you so you took many years writing this book and sharing just exposing and being so just tender with allowing us to share in your journey. And we're going to do a book club. with the author, which I think is a very special thing. So I just want to invite you to invite people to it and just maybe set it up a little bit. What is your kind of hope and thoughts about gathering with people around your book?
Well, I've done a bunch of gatherings in person and online for people who feel like they're failing at healing. And I think that it's really radical to come together and feel less isolated. That a lot of us are isolated by our bodies. Like we can't leave the house. And so the really beautiful thing about online gatherings is they let people who are isolated by their conditions actually come together. And oftentimes when you're sick, it's hard to be with people because they want to solve you. They want to say, have you tried this treatment, have you tried this thing, and it can feel so burdensome and hard. You're like, of course I've tried everything, but am I always a problem? Can't I just be? Can I just be with this experience for once? And I think what's really powerful about coming together around these questions is that we can hold each other in this without trying to solve each other. I mean, I think it would be lovely to talk about some of the exercises and some of the things that I outline in the book, like the prayers that I arrive at, the practices I arrive at towards the end of the story. And hopefully, we can take those two sessions to maybe workshop those a little bit together, and actually do them, and see what we arrive at. But I also think that just sharing stories and sharing experience is really, really radical because so many of us feel isolated and like we don't have a lot of other people to talk about this with. Oh, you're muted, Jonathan.
Uh,
There you
so, so healing for people who are more able-bodied, is the book club appropriate for them? If
go. Oh my
they're the
gosh, of
healing that
course.
they're trying to,
Absolutely. I
whether
mean,
it's relationship or yeah,
we are all in pain and sick right now. We are living inside an earth that is out of its window of tolerance and it is upset. We are all living on the tidal waves and on the bucking root systems. You know, we are all right now trying to salvage a life and to survive. So I think that it's always important for me to plant this in a larger ecological context, which is we are living in late stage capitalism and in climate crisis. So we are all in crisis and we can all hold each other and learn how to hold each other better in the midst of that.
yeah, yeah. Amen. Well, I want to conclude with a thank you and a bit of gratitude. Normally, the last five book clubs I've done, I knew the author and read the book before, and then made the invitation. And in this one, I just loved you as a philosopher, just watching you on YouTube. And then when and I invited you to do the book club with me, and then I read the book. And as I shared with you, I've had chronic fatigue syndrome for, over 30 years. And I felt so seen, so nourished by you sharing what you have experienced. And it's a real balm to stop thinking, even if for only a moment, that human wholeness or well-being or joy is dependent on something like how well I feel today, or the state of a relationship, or an economic circumstance. And that is a message that not only I feel is incredibly valuable for my life, but for so many others. So just deep bow and thank you for taking the time to share with us today and to write from your soul.
Well, thank you guys so much. Thank you, Jonathan. I'm very sick right now and I'm not able to do almost any events. So this is really precious to me. Like, you guys are like some of the only people I'm going to see for this, book publicity experience. And so it's really like you have come into me and changed me. And thank you deeply.
Mm, Well, thank you again for being with us. So, we put in the link, a few
Yeah.
things, Sophie's website, a place to order the book, a place to look at the book club. So to all the hundreds that are with us right now, to the thousands that are watching this on YouTube, you can go and look at the links below. And we warmly invite you. We start in 2 weeks from today, which is the March 18th. And if you can't make all the live sessions, that's all right. They'll all be recorded. But if you can come and be live with Sophie, I highly recommend it.
I love actually seeing people's faces and saying hello. So, because
Yeah,
some of you have been writing me for so long. And so it's amazing to see your faces and be like, I know you. So thank you.
Yeah. And it won't be just like an interview like this. This will be interacting with Sophie, and as she said, the prayers and practices that are woven in the book will be kind of workshopped and looked at and expanded. All right. Hope to see you in 2 weeks, everyone. Read that
Bye.
book.